Happy Wednesday, everyone. Hello and welcome to today's My Best Workshop 4. My name is Precious Miller and I am the coordinator of My Best. Can everyone hear me okay? Can I get a thumbs up from the team? Okay, great. So I am so looking forward to the dialogue that's going to take place among us today. What you can say your appetite for is enriching opportunities to talk with our colleagues from across the state. You know, one thing that I have appreciated about the pandemic is the opportunity to connect despite the distance between us. So let's jump right in. Speaking of connections, I would like to again highlight my fabulous and amazing colleagues, Jenny Shanker, Erica Oriens, and Katie Girardello, who will soon be Dr. Katie Girardello. She is approaching the home stretch for her doctoral program. So congratulations, Katie. We love to celebrate you this morning.
Thank you. It'll be a little while. I'm just getting the proposal off the ground, but I do appreciate the kudos.
Absolutely. So the agenda before us today is packed with opportunities again for engagement. Today's goal is to really promote some cross-sharing of knowledge and resources, and I hope that is captured in the morning's lineup. So we have completed the welcome, and welcome everyone. We will soon go into elbow partner breakout rooms. This will be done at random. We have some really great feedback about doing this in previous workshops as you know, it allows for us to have those side conversations that we would normally have when we were in-person convenings. So sitting next to someone while they're having their cup of coffee, walking in the hallway with our colleagues to the next workshop, that will be our elbow partner breakout rooms. Then we have our My Best Guided Pathways intersection conversation. We have NCII joining us, and they will be sharing a brief talk before jumping into a panel discussion, followed by identifying student needs. And that will be when we have colleges share their perspective and experience and their knowledge on how they go about identifying needs at their institutions, followed by some share out of resources and ways that other institutions have worked to identify their student needs, understand their student needs, as well as understand the needs of their community. Then we will close with a breakout for institutions to talk about how we can move from the challenges that we've been facing in 2020 to, okay, what do actionable steps look like in 2021? And then we will end, as always, with next steps, because there's always something exciting happening in the Center of Student Success. So we are all pretty familiar with Zoom engagement at this point. I welcome you all to change your name to reflect your institution, as this will be helpful for when we do our breakouts. And we welcome everyone to participate in the chat, ask questions, share resources, talk about strategies that have worked, strategies that didn't work even. We want this opportunity, this workshop to really be an opportunity for everyone to share with each other. When I was doing the financial stability scale of adoption assessment calls, one thing that was a resounding ask is for cross sharing. And so we were hoping to elevate your voices and give opportunities for everyone to share amongst everyone. So we are now going to head into our elbow partner breakout rooms. Everyone can take a big, deep breath here in that elbow breakout room. You have an opportunity for some unstructured time to talk about things related to My Best, things not related to My Best, maybe the package that's sitting on your front door that you can't get to because you're in a Zoom webinar right now. Whatever is top of mind for you in that breakout room, feel free to share. And Erica is going to support us in getting into our breakout rooms. So please bear with us. Technology seems to work until it doesn't.
Right. Thanks, Precious. So I will, this Elbow Partners came about because it's just, like Precious said, a great opportunity for folks to connect early on. So I will be putting folks in breakout rooms of about 3 to 4 people, randomly assigned. And just to have that informal conversation. The only thing I'll ask is the MCCA staff and the NCII staff, you'll also be placed in breakout rooms. Please join those rooms. If there are at least 2 people in there, you're free to leave so that they can talk. You're also free to stay. But please stay if there's only one person in there that is actively participating in the webinar, right?
It is always a pleasure for me to introduce and welcome them into our virtual spaces and hopefully soon our in-person spaces, as I feel like I learned so much from the both of you as it pertains to student success and different ways to begin to think about how to support the basic needs of our students. They're going to be sharing a little bit about the overlap that they see from their perspective of guided pathways and My Best. And you know, a lot of times, sometimes the overlap can be so seamless that it can be difficult to recognize. Sometimes we might be within one initiative, not realizing that another one is also intertwined. So I'm looking forward to hearing from them, as well as the facilitation of the panel discussion that they will all lead us into. Rob and Priya, do you have slides to share?
I have 2 slides, which I'll share in a couple of minutes, if that's okay.
Absolutely. You can go ahead and take it away.
Rob, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, and I'm going to do something you guys are not going to believe. I'm going to get out of the way in like 90 seconds because there's there's panelists and Priya to come out. I just wanted to say at the start of this that it's great to see all of you again. And again, thank you for all the work you've done over the last 10 months. I still say that at the start of every call. I know this has not been an easy year, and we are very much appreciative of all you've done for your students and communities. This intersection of guided pathways and student financial stability, as Precious says, sometimes it can be seamless. Sometimes I will tell you that Priya and I have been on this journey for almost as long as NCII has been a thing, since 2013, because the first things we were working on were completion by design and a project called Beyond Financial Aid. And so we've been looking at these two pillars of the student experience. And I think that's what weaves these together, is both of them should be a maniacal focus on the student experience. And over the years, I would say that since 2013, the guided pathways train has gone very on a strong slope, and the student financial stability strain has been on a slope, but it hasn't been quite as aggressive. And I think that that is something that's starting to change. And I will tell you why in a second, really quickly. You know, before the pandemic, I would say that both of these kind of frameworks, the guided pathways framework and the student financial stability framework, really asked you to place the student experience at the center, to produce scaled approaches that kind of sat at the intersection of kind of structure and culture. So both of them need you to change structures at scale, and both of them need you to change cultures at scale. And that was true pre-pandemic. One of the things that, in all the horrible things that have happened in the pandemic, one of the things that I think it has led to for all of us who work on this side of the colleges is perhaps an increase in empathy for what our students are going through. Because as we get on these Zoom calls and we have kids in the background and we have internet coverage that makes our video go down, and we have constant interruptions, and we don't have any time between Zoom calls, I think one of the things that does is remind us what our students have always been dealing with. And they've been dealing with these types of issues for much longer than the pandemic. And so I think that this increase potentially in empathy could be one of the lasting effects of the pandemic. I hope that it is, that we take a perspective that many of our students are going through. We don't make the fundamental attribution error and always attribute things that seem negative to the person rather than the situation. We do the opposite for positive things with us, by the way, that we actually have that empathy. And the second thing I'll say is that I think the other thing we've done in the last 10 months is have an incredible amount of flexibility in our approaches to the classroom and our approaches to support. And so I hope as we move forward to the kind of mid-pandemic and post-pandemic times, we plan what comes next, especially at the intersection of guided pathways and student financial stability, that we really focus on that nexus between empathy for our students and flexibility in our approaches to our students, that can be the foundation on which you build your guided pathways and student financial stability evolutions and reforms. But it has to come back to that student experience being at the center, and empathy for what brings students to the table, recognition of the amazing assets that they have, and also flexibility in our approach. We're not gonna be able to do everything, but I think that's a great foundation to start from. That is the only thing I'm gonna say today. I wanna turn it to Priya and also then to our panelists. But thank you all, and I look forward to hearing great stuff from Priya and the panelists. So thank you, Priya.
Thanks, Rob. And I think that framing is really critical, because one of the statements that I heard from a college practitioner last week was, this has revealed to us that this is the minimum care we need to provide to our students, which is almost a challenge for this work, because post-COVID, post-vaccine, post the reality of what we are swimming in right now, it might be natural to start forgetting and go back to a usual that sometimes services us as institutions more than it services students. And one other thing I want to mention kind of broadly is we talk about the monolith of the student experience as if all student experiences are equal. But we also know that even in the pandemic, which has just exacerbated the realities we knew pre-March, different student groups, different students have experienced the same interactions very, very differently. And I think it's really important for us to also put at heart of this the notion of equity-centeredness and equity-mindedness in our work. So how can we ensure that our systems and structures are not just designed and redesigned with historically marginalized and underrepresented groups, but that they are actually also dismantled and removed if they have actually been barriers for our students in the past as well. And so I just want to take a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about what these intersections between guided pathways and student financial stability can look like. But most importantly, I want to really devote the rest of our conversation today to hear from three of our colleagues who, even in the prep call, I wish I could just record the prep call, because the way that they were talking about the intersections, Jeremy's laughing, I can see him here. It was exactly the nature of how inextricably linked these are, as Precious, you're saying, how invisible they seem because they are so much what we swim in. So I am going to share my screen, and if you can indulge me for a moment, something I used to do last year that this year has, tried to change is actually begin with a poem. And so if you indulge me, I'm going to start with a very quick gem from Lucille Clifton. She's just a national treasure. And it's called Won't You Celebrate With Me? She writes, won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model. Born in Babylon, both non-white and woman, what did I see to be except myself? I made it up here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight, my other hand. Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. And so I start here because today we are going to very specifically talk about the variety of student experiences, but this pandemic specifically, and kind of generally has affected not only our students, but ourselves and our colleagues and our abilities to be able to do our work. And so I think there's that same extension of empathy and flexibility and engagement and sense of connection that we want to also extend to ourselves and our peers in this work as well. And so, as Rob mentioned, there are two organizing frameworks that we're kind of talking about today, which is really around looking at guided pathways, the 4 pillars of guided pathways that really sequence the work of the institution, clarifying paths to students' goals, helping students get on those paths, stay on those paths, and ensure that students are learning. And then the other one, which many of you may have seen before, the Lost Momentum Framework, which came out of Completion by Design. And this one really tries to organize the student experience. So if you can think of it as a way that our colleague Ed Bowling talks about it, the Guided Pathways Framework is a blueprint for what we as institutions can do. And the Lost Momentum Framework is from the perspective of the student. And so the more we can try to center our design and redesign efforts in how different groups of students are impacted, intentionally or unintentionally, the more impact we'll actually see that is sustainable. And so very, very quickly, before we get into the panelists, which I'm so excited about, I'm going to just give an example of what the intersection of student financial stability and guided pathways can look like for each phase of the Lost Momentum Framework. So this is the ability of students to connect to the college, enter, make progress, complete, and then advance to either a career in the workforce or to a transfer university, et cetera. And so the first one is when a student is coming to the institution or learning about it, where are there opportunities to know what types of basic needs supports might also be available in addition to the traditional forms of financial aid. In our quick elbow breakout We talked a little bit about the Frontliners effort and how much we have to really supplement that with additional supports that students don't, monies that they don't have to pay back. In the entry phase, specifically around guided pathways, when students are exploring meta majors and programs, how can they also know about how much the program is going to cost, not just in tuition and fees, but all the way into equipment and testing, supplies, etc. And also, how do they know what the value proposition is? That if they enroll in a particular program, what kinds of career aspirations and salary expectations can also come with that? Progress and completion, this is one that I think the last 8 months have made the case for so naturally, which is in order to help our students stay on path, how can we ensure that they get the service and support they need when they need it and how they need it? So we tend to front load a lot of our information through orientations and onboarding, but how can we weave that into the 3rd, 4th, and 5th semesters for students as well? And then lastly, around advancement, if students are transitioning into the workforce or into a transfer university, where are there opportunities for them to know if they have loans or if they have to make a financial plan for their next 2 or 3 years at the university, how to be able to ensure that there is clarity around that kind of financial plan. And so I just offer some suggestions for ways that the academic and the so-called non-academic needs, such as basic needs, are actually quite inextricably linked. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and
call her and ask her about furniture for out front.
Sorry?
Thank you.
That was a mistake, Priya. Just keep going.
Oh, no sweat. Okay, so I'm really, really thrilled. We're going to spend the rest of our time kind of talking with 3 of your colleagues from other colleges, and I would just invite each of you, I'm going to ask each of you to just introduce yourselves, your name, your institution, and your role, and then we can dive into the questions. So I'll go ahead and start with Lindsay. Hi, Lindsay, with the very cool virtual background.
Hi there. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lindsay Dickinson, and I'm the Director of Academic Career Advising at Northwestern Michigan College.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Hey everybody, I'm Jeremy Belanger, and I'm the Executive Director of Transfer and Student Advising up at Bay College in the UP.
Great. And Ashley?
Hi, good morning. My name is Ashley Van Heest, and I'm the Director of Transfer and Scheduling at Jackson College.
Great. So thank you very much for being willing to share your stories with us. And as Precious mentioned, what we have really tried to do is talk less and amplify the voices of your colleagues more, because you are doing such incredible work and are thinking about how this impacts not only individual work moving forward, but also systemic and institutional work moving forward. So Lindsay, I'll start with you. The question I'd like to ask each of you is, reflecting on this relationship between academic needs and so-called non-academic needs like food, housing, technology, healthcare, particularly mental health care, childcare. What have the last few months of the pandemic illuminated for you and your colleagues about the experiences of your students? As I mentioned earlier, how those experiences vary for different groups. So Lindsay, we can start with you.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. Well, I think one thing that we've all seen, and I'm sure each of you have experienced, is kind of what we talked about with empathy and in inviting ourselves into our students' lives even more than we ever did. I feel like we've all never been more human. Being on calls and having your kids climb up your back or interrupt your meetings, having our students, conduct their Zoom calls or their classroom sessions from their cars, from their bedrooms. We are quite literally being invited into their lives. And I would always talk with colleagues about, our advisees, when they come to our offices, they don't check their lives at the door. They come in and they bring their whole selves. Well, gosh, I felt like I never experienced the half of it until now. And it's been an incredible experience for many reasons. I think that when we look at especially our new incoming students for this past fall, and I'm sure you all experienced this, wow, there was such a dichotomy between those students who maybe came directly from high school and had those 3 months of the final, semester last year to be online with their school and learn those skills about how to participate in the classroom. And then the students who maybe had even 1 semester break or are coming back to college for the first time this fall and are maybe, 10 years out of high school or more. And their needs were just so great. And yes, a lot of it was technology, but of course, because you're being invited into their home every time you talk with them, you're hearing about their other needs. And so, our food pantry stayed busy throughout this pandemic. And I have to give big kudos to Lisa Thomas and our whole student life team who just really stepped up and made that continue to happen. I think the other thing that I found so fascinating was that we went from having student appointments for advising purposes that would last anywhere from 20 minutes to 45 minutes, once in a while an hour, to now we have these new students coming through orientation, and an hour is a minimum time frame that we work with them. Because in many situations, and again with online orientation and so many things going virtual, we are the first human they have talked to. And so all of their questions come out, and it doesn't matter if they are about advising or career pathway or, how to get books or whatever, it's all coming to the first human they talk to. And so that to me was one, it's an extraordinary privilege, but gosh, I don't know about y'all, but I'm exhausted. And I think we're all feeling that now.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Lindsay. Jeremy, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, and I echo the experience that Lindsay just expressed. And I think one of the big things that we've learned that was probably the most surprising to me was as you get that glimpse into their home lives, you see the demonstration of the tightrope that our students are walking every day prior to the pandemic. And I mean, we all kind of knew about that in the background and knew, working a part-time job, taking care of your little brother or little sister, that one thing is going to derail their academic career and their success. But you throw the pandemic on top of that, and it literally is one thing that stops a student. We saw about twice the withdrawal rate that we typically do. And a lot of the time it wasn't about anything significant. A lot of the time the reason was, I just can't deal with it anymore. And this is the item that I can cut out of my life for now so that I can deal with the rest of my life. And I get it. And I think we all get it, but it's frustrating because this education is their biggest investment into the future. So the concern on our end is, are they going to come back? And with the experience that we've all had over the last year, are they going to want to come back even if they can? Because even when the pandemic ends, their experience is what they're going to remember. And it's up to us to demonstrate to them that the support services are there for them. And it's been a scramble on our end, at least, to make sure that those support services are there. Because what we thought they needed to be in January are not what they demonstrated to us they needed to be in March and October and November. So it's been a learning experience, but I think what Priya mentioned too is the key for us is to make sure that we don't forget the things that we learn now and that we apply them moving forward, even post-pandemic, because all of those concerns and challenges were always there. It's just that they maybe didn't surface because the pandemic wasn't there to scrape away the cover. So I think that's the key for us, is to try to learn from this.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Ashley?
Excuse me. Yes to all of those things, right? So we definitely can't hide from this. Not that I feel like anybody thought we were trying to hide from it before. I think we all at our institutions have done tremendous work on our student experience systems and our intake processes and our student support services and all of these things where we feel like we are so student ready. Our institution is student ready. But something like this, what it's highlighted for me is that even with all of those best intentions, the number of assumptions perhaps that we've made, that just because someone had formally been able to make our system work for them, if you sort of give them an opportunity or you force them into an opportunity where they don't have to use that system, they're almost running away from it, right? So our Center for Student Success, which is amazing and has tremendous tutoring options, for a really, really, really long time, those tutoring options existed Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. And now we have, through the great work, Monica Bowman is our director of the Center for Student Success, and she's our MI Best lead. We have expanded our on-demand and online tutoring. Most of our tutoring hours now happen in the evenings and on the weekends. And you think, gosh, why weren't we always doing this? We've assumed, well, yeah, students must be able to come to us in the middle of the day to meet with their navigator or to meet with financial aid or to go to the Center for Student Success. And since they've been doing it, that must mean that they can. But now, kind of without that boundary there, time and space are constructs now. So the number of advising appointments that take place in somebody's car when they're on their lunch break. And so you almost kind of kick yourself for, again, all of these feelings of like, no, we've got this. We're so student focused and we are so student ready, until you actually are kind of forced into this spot of seeing your students as people. And yeah, because you can't hide from, I don't know if you saw my daughter, she needed a pencil. And of course, it's like right now that she needs a pencil. And I apparently have the only pencil in our house on our desk. So just the stuff like that, that you get to experience that with each other, but with our students, that everyone kind of is in the same boat. So that's been those assumptions that we've made have been, it's a little bit scary almost that we were making them for as long as we were.
Ashley, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think something that you said in our prep call that really kind of got to me was the sense of putting students into, like, forcing them into our systems. Would you mind kind of talking a little? I know you've already done that, but I loved that kind of reality there.
Yeah, well, I think that, that example with our Center for Student Success is a good one, right? It made sense to us that we would be open during business hours. And we define business hours in the same way that everyone else defines business hours, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And why we assumed that any part of this education process was limited to business hours. And that's not a slight on anyone or on their process. We've just done, like, that's just the typical way. That's been the norm and that's been the status quo. Every office is that way. Navigators, the business office, financial aid, sort of all of these things that we count in under those support services. And that is our system. And we tell students, hey, this is what it is. And you're going to find a way to make this work, because if you need to meet with your navigator, here's when those navigators are available. And on the assumption side, because they were finding a way to make it work, we were like, oh, well, good, done. You figured this out, so therefore it must not be wrong. And so now in these spots where they just really can't figure it out, as Jeremy and Lindsay said, there's so many other things. They're kind of already just on a razor's edge of, if one more thing goes wrong, I can't hold it together. But when you open up these options and these opportunities, like, well, what if tutoring was in the evening? What if it was on the weekend? And then you see them run toward those options that are not what we would have defined as our system options. That's been interesting.
And as you're talking, Ashley, what came to mind was this idea of even a self-fulfilling prophecy, where we use evidence that confirms our way of doing things as a sign that it is successful, but it's partially successful. And there is something about the pandemic that, like, broadly I would characterize as, this is the way things are, but why do they have to be this way? I mean, there are people that are talking about the construct of a final, or the construct of having a syllabus before class starts, or co-creating with students. And so, we don't have time today, but I think there's a very important conversation around power and agency, about who decides and how people can decide what can be shifted and how radical our imagination can be, given what we know our students need. I'd like to kind of move us to the second kind of half of this, which is, given these kinds of realizations and insights and reality checks, how does this inform your work as an institution? Lindsay, if you don't mind, I'll do a rinse and repeat.
Yeah, I think Priya, what you just said about just making the decision, like who decides what can be changed and how things can be changed, I think that's really critical here. If there's one thing that I have taken away, it's that sometimes it's better to not talk about it and to just try it and do it. And take the action and see what happens, because I think we would all agree that at some level at our institutions, we love to talk about things and talk about what could happen and assess what did happen before and how we're doing now, and then maybe get to the point of action. But in this environment, I think that we have never been quicker to action, and I think that's been a great change. I think that's allowed us to truly be nimble, like we've always talked about, and to truly respond to students' needs in real time. I think in terms of what happens with our institution going forward, and like how we might see some of these things hold over, to Ashley's point, gosh, maybe we should try doing something differently. Another thing that I've seen is just, it's never been more important for us to be flexible with one another, for our students, in our decision making, in our action steps, and also it's never been more important to have strong communication and partnerships. And that's both across campus, right? At a time when it has seemingly gotten even harder to communicate with one another because we're not right next door in an office. We've had to be so much more intentional about that communication. And it's really brought, just like with our students, it brings things right to the surface. Boy, did it shed some light on things for us. I think, making sure that we have that communication and that we are really purposefully partnering and we are creating a more seamless workflow within, so that our students experience that as well. So, we tend to silo ourselves off and say, well, you do this and you do this and you do that. And it's important because we are specialists and we are experts in our areas, but we all do have to know a little bit about everything in order to make it a good experience for our students. And I really hope that partnership within our campus community continues. And, I think we'll hear from others too, but partnerships with our community. I have been so impressed with how our community has partnered with us during this time. And as it relates to My Best and the work that's going to continue, I think that puts us in a really good position to grow.
Thank you so much for that, Lindsay. Jeremy.
I think one of the things that we've learned, or we will find out whether we learned or not, was to meet students not where they say they are, but where they actually are. We demonstrated that in our fall semester, where we said, you know what, students told us they wanted classes in person. So if it's possible, without significant health risks, we're going to offer classes in person. What they did is they enrolled in record numbers in online classes. And I think we very often like to pick the self-fulfilling prophecy where we say, well, the students want in person, and that's what we are as a higher education institution, is an in-person institution. So we're going to continue to offer in-person classes. And that's just a simple example. I mean, students are demonstrating over and over to us, like Ashley said, evening, why are we not offering, more services in the evening? Yep, it's a challenge to us, but if that's where the students are, we need to figure out, can we accomplish supporting students academically, non-academically, whatever it is. I mean, if we looked 20 years ago, we wouldn't be talking about My Best topics. We would say, you're going to come to class, you're going to get good grades, and you're going to move on. And we don't care what's happening in your personal life. And we've learned, and it's now because of COVID, an opportunity for us to increase the curve and help students more holistically than we ever have before, even with fewer resources than we've ever had before. So it's a challenge, but it's there and we know it's there. So we have to try.
And to add to that, Jeremy, I think that given what some of our peers have been talking about in terms of enrollment drops and even withdrawals that we're seeing, it's going to be even more important to retain the students we have. And if we know that non-academic, outside of the classroom, outside of the campus, efforts make or break the ability of a student, even with the best intentions, there is a shared responsibility there as well. Ashley, how has this, kind of given what you were talking about in terms of the insights, how does this inform the way that you think about the work moving forward?
One thing that I'm feeling very excited about, it actually is something that lives on the academic side of the house. And because the hand was forced in terms of the kinds of things like where everything had to be online, we had a number of spots, disciplines, faculty, departments that were like, nope, can't do it. No way. This is not an online class. It never has been. It never will be, until it has to be. And then you're like, oh, this actually works out pretty well. And we actually have these resources and these lab kits and it to sort of force everybody into that really creative and innovative space of figuring out how to do something differently. I'm excited of what that could mean for our future in terms of programming and courses. And again, where it sort of stems down from everything else of, these are things that our students potentially have been wanting and needing for some time. And now it's staring us in the face, and it's our responsibility, it's our duty to act on it and to respond to that. So academically, I'm excited about what I feel like some of those new options that we have are. From a support side, and Lindsay mentioned it as well, in terms of those community relationships, there are a number of school districts in our county, 13, I think, and they all, from a K-12 perspective, they all are doing something different. So it's 13 ways from Sunday of how their particular model is rolling out. And for them, what we've heard from them is the constant right now that they have is us and what we are doing and what we are offering. And so it has strengthened that relationship that much more in working with, this education and online and all of that seems to be kind of at the forefront of everybody's mind. And so to really feel like a guidance tool for our community in terms of that, even if it's not our institution that a student goes to, we still have a duty to provide information and to make a clear path into what all of the resources are. And so I think that's interesting as well, where you kind of, these moments where we've all had to rally as a community around our young people and our not young people for what it is that they're wanting to go on and do. And so I think that relationship that's been so strengthened is exciting as well.
Leave it to you, Ashley, to find all sorts of strange gifts of this time. And I just want to echo that. I think each of you have shared that there have been some extraordinary challenges, and there have also been opportunities to see what is possible. I mean, I'm sure each of you could imagine right now something that February you would have never imagined April you to be living, whether it's this, shift to remote instruction or whatever it may be. And so I think part of this is like, how do we hold on? How do we do that in a non-pandemic context moving forward, knowing that the realities of our students continue to be the same. So thank you all. I don't know, Precious, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you. But I look forward to hearing more and more stories of the work that you are doing at your institutions in service of our students. Thank you all.
Wow. I don't know about the rest of you, but I just feel so inspired by everything that has been shared and really entering 2021 with some new momentum as we begin to understand the significance that exists within innovation, creativity, partnership, community collaboration. I just thank you all panelists for what you shared with us today. If you all have the brain space to dive into the Twitter world, Katie has been our Twitter in chief this morning as she's capturing our conversations and our thoughts today. So feel free to venture off into that space if that is something that would interest you. We are going to continue on with our program. So we're going to be shining some spotlight onto some institutions who have begun to look at identifying student needs in a specific way. So the validation calls that were held with each institution, everyone is taking a different approach to understanding student needs. And every approach is going to be different because what exists, the culture that exists at each institution is also different. But I wanted to offer an opportunity for institutions to share the approach that they're taking to understand student needs. So we're going to be going in order, starting with Jackson, KVCC, Ma, and Muskegon. And I just welcome each of you to share a few minutes to talk about the tools and strategies that you use to identify the needs of your students, but as well as what takes place after that student need has been identified, and how has your campus practices changed, or what campus practice was developed as a result of you identifying the needs of your students. So with that, I will offer the opportunity for Monica and Nathan to share first, followed by Lewis, Dinah, and Patty.
All right, I think I'm going to get this started and then Monica is going to jump in. So it's great to be here. And again, I just think Jeremy, Lindsay, Ash, I think you guys did a tremendous job. I thought that was great. So but in regards to this, as Rob was talking and the group and panelists were talking, I think when it comes to a lot of this stuff, we have some things in process that we'll get to, and I'll specifically talk a lot about intake and how you bring students in so we can be as proactive as possible. And even if, we can get something in place where it's even before intake, that's even better. How do we create that culture as soon as possible to get the information we need to assist students? But one thing that I've been learning as we've been going through all of this, and when it comes to, it could be the economic stability stuff, it could be just needs of students and how they're progressing through this, is that people in general right now we talk often about fight or flight, but now we're hearing more and more literature come out about freeze. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing now, they're freezing. And we're seeing some students needing to take additional time to make that decision before they either fight or flight, right? So people's initial response is typically to freeze and not take action. Fortunately, now we're not in a situation where you get eaten by a bear, right? So you can take that time and digest the information and make the best choice you can. Sometimes what we're seeing, and this is relevant in the sense, I have some navigators who have been reporting that we have a lot of students who are returning students. So they're not current students. They were here, they took the semester off, and now they're coming back to now re-enroll in the winter. What that data is going to look like, I'm not yet sure, but it's more than a few and less than a lot. So that's our registrar's language of a lot. So going back to that, I just think we see that a fair amount now. At least that's what our navigators are reporting. But when it comes to focusing specifically on the needs of students, we've tried a few different things at Jackson, specifically with intake, trying to make sure that we're asking the appropriate questions as early as possible. As many of you know, our model is set up in a way where we bring students in. We do have the fortunate enough circumstance to have each student meet with an individual. And as Lindsay said, a lot of times now these appointments are going longer, and it's not just one appointment now, it's 2 or 3 appointments. And that's something that I would just like to share with everybody. If you're not in the student services time, it's taking a substantially longer amount of time to meet the needs of our students and progress them through from what used to be could be a 15-minute, 10-minute walk-in appointment is now taking an hour or 2 30-minute appointments and multiple emails. It's just not progressing at the same pace in which we used to think it would. But that also lends itself to more opportunities to meet the underlying needs of students and having those conversations with students and opening the door. And that's what our model is about. We've changed our intake assessment. So we used to have one that included questions about really just your insecurities and your needs for housing, for paying bills, for transportation. We changed our assessment to using a tool as opposed to a homegrown assessment. So we need to look back at how we can ask those questions on the very front end of our application or when we're signing up our students for their appointments. Right now, again, we rely on the communication and the individual relationship with the navigator to help then direct students to the appropriate resources. And in that regard, it's even more so important, and I talked about this at an internal meeting on Friday, that we need to make sure that we're giving the students the appropriate care in which they specifically need, not this en masse approach that's been discussed time and again, that it's good for, for casting a wide net, but you're still like, all these little fish are swimming out of that net and no one's getting caught in it. You're pulling up nothing. So we need to treat each individual with the care that they specifically need to be successful. And the term I use is kitten mittens. You need to treat them with kitten mittens, and you need to do soft handoffs instead of hard handoffs. Instead of just go talk to the business office, we need to connect you directly to the business office with this specific person. Like I'll CC you on the email to them. Like, it's those additional steps that in general take about 30 seconds to a minute to do the additional step, but it's things that are missed oftentimes because it just takes that little bit of extra. And I think once we get better at identifying those insecurities as students are coming in, since we changed our intake assessment, it'll be those things that are what's going to help lead to success on the front end, are those soft type handoffs instead of, again, just the pushing to department. So with that, I'll let Monica jump in if she's here. I don't see her on the.
I'm here, Nathan.
Okay.
I can see you. How about
Okay.
that?
I see you now.
Good morning, everyone. Monica from Jackson College. I'm the Center for Student Success Director here, and then I'm also the institution's Disability Inclusion Officer. Happy to be here. I'll try to make it brief. I know we were trying to stick to 5 minutes. So I'm going to concentrate more on the resource side of the house. Nathan covered the intake, but then what do we do with that? Oftentimes, we are so fortunate. I don't mean to be boastful, but I do feel truly blessed to work at Jackson College. Not only, and it's really come to light through our remote world, right? So we had a lot of these things in place as a result of these intake assessments, like our food pantry, our Oasis Center, which we partnered with Family Services and Children's Aid locally. And so we have a fully staffed Oasis Center where students can now virtually visit with a mental health counselor. And that's so important now. So before, when a student may have had a poor interaction with a student, or with an instructor rather, on campus live, now they can, maybe they're struggling with being remote or not being able to interact as often with others in the outside world. And so they're still able to connect with those counselors, which is so important right now. In regards to the food pantry, obviously with COVID, the food pantry isn't fully functioning, but we recently did a huge holiday food box giveaway for our students, 200 boxes where students could come to campus and take a food box for the holidays. So we thought that was pretty neat. A fully functioning health clinic, super awesome. Again, on campus, if a student was experiencing, not feeling very well, they could make an appointment and go to the health clinic. And they're still continuing those virtual appointments now for free for students. So important. More importantly, especially with the pandemic and working remote, is our emergency request form. So a student can simply fill out the emergency request form. So before, I think we can all relate to the statement of a student is one crisis away from not coming back or not continuing and not persisting for that semester. Well, it used to be, I have a flat tire, my spark plugs are bad, whatever. Now it's, I don't have proper internet connection, or I don't have a device at home to continue online with my classes. And so really that emergency request form, even though we already had it in place, has become so vital for students persisting on here at the college. And then of course, there's the referral side of the house. So with our intake appointment, our intake assessments that Nathan was speaking to, oftentimes, even though we have amazing resources on campus made possible by Jackson College, there's also things that we simply can't do everything, right? And so there's MyBridges, 211, things like that too, that we can now point students to. So with it, I know I probably went over time. I'll stop. Thank you for. Yeah.
Everything you shared was so helpful, and I'm seeing some hot nodded heads, that these are experiences that all of us to some degree are experiencing in our spaces. And one thing that has been resounding in just all of what has been shared this morning is connection and how powerful connections can be, whether those are internal to the institution or external into the community, because the reality of it is we're not islands, and we operate the best when we work and come together. I would love to welcome Lewis into the conversation. Lewis, could you share a little bit about KVCC strategy to understanding students, what happens after those student needs are identified, and if any campus changes or practices have been put in place as a result of understanding student need?
Absolutely. Thanks again for allowing me the opportunity to kind of share what we're doing at KVCC. I feel like we've made some really positive strides recently. And one of the things that's worked really well for us is similar to Jackson, is the intake survey. So our students at the point of registration are required to do a survey during the fall and also the winter. And we're intentional about making sure that survey was a little different from semester to semester, so that students understand that we're trying to assist them, but at the same time, we don't want them to do the same thing over and over again. But it always assesses the basic needs. Once we have that information, there's a follow-up, and we've been relying on our Salesforce system to kind of do that. So once students have identified a specific need, we refer them to the resource or to that department. But we can also do some communication via Salesforce to make sure students have made contact. I think one of the things that we've learned college-wide is sometimes it's up to us to make that contact as well. So sometimes students are identified based on financial need as well for additional resources and programs. And those programs are being proactive in reaching out to students. And taking that pressure off students as well. So it kind of goes both ways. We mentioned technology, the need for technology, especially during the pandemic. Once we identified that we had some additional resources for students, again, Salesforce was a vehicle we used to communicate that to a larger amount of students fairly efficiently. So again, once the referrals are made, students are being connected to the appropriate departments, but also additional resources that may be off campus. So for instance, if a student cites food insecurity, we have a Valley Share Food program on campus that distributes food shares every other week to students. But in addition to that, they'll receive information for Kalamazoo loaves and fishes, where a student could get additional food if needed. In addition to that, our counseling department is moving to a case management model. Again, the need to identify those basic needs for students is even more essential now. So I think Nathan mentioned earlier, there's a lot more time being spent during those initial appointments to identify those needs and make sure that we have a good idea of how to best support that student. But also in KVAP, our program, that's also something that we do at the front end. Our students are required to do an intake interview. And there's an application process as well, where we're trying to have students communicate to us what they think they need to be successful. That doesn't always come up in that application. So our job, once we get to the intake interview, is to kind of like ask some more deeper questions of students and have a dialogue around it. And once we do that, some other things come to the forefront. And our counselors make notes of that. And again, try to point students to the appropriate resources. I think since we kind of dived into this work, a lot of good initiatives have come out of it. Again, the Valley Food Share was born out of this. But we're starting to see more of a presence in our classrooms. So our first year experience courses often share these resources when they're going over the syllabus. because we understand that so many of our students, this is going to make the difference between them persistent or not. So those resources are shared on day one, but also in our orientations, our various fairs, and we're inviting our community partners as well to be involved in that. So, you know, it's not uncommon to have anything on campus and not see the YWCA, Kalamazoo Mental Health Services, GRIFON place. Additional resources that we think will be necessary for helping our students be successful. But also one thing that I think that I'm excited to see that has come out of this is that the awareness of, you know, our colleagues, staff, faculty, because that's also a huge referral for us. A lot of times where we're in these department meetings or committee meetings, we're sharing what we're seeing. So faculty is sharing what they're seeing from students and what some of those themes and what those needs might be. And also our student success services employees are sharing what they're seeing. And that gives us an opportunity to discuss that and see what we might be able to do, how we may be able to respond to those needs. The other piece is being in KVAP, it's a smaller cohort, 120 students. And a lot of times it's a captive audience where we can survey them and see what their needs are. Everyone in KVAP has financial needs. These are low-income students. So I think our institution understands that sometimes we can start there just by surveying this captive population and then getting some real good information that may be scalable for our entire student body. So I'll stop there, you know, but there are a lot of other opportunities that are taking place with in the community. One that I'm really excited about, there's a collective of judges, attorneys, mental health specialists, and community advocates that are coming together to kind of assist students that may have some legal challenges. So there's a collective of community resources that are looking to serve the student holistically because they understand that students who may have more than a few encounters with the criminal system, it's really based on, you know, a number of things: poverty, racial discrimination, and a lack of access to opportunities. So this Kalamazoo Defender Group is coming together to support community and provide resources and support to kind of help students, not just students, but community members get back on track.
Yeah. Thank you, Louis, for sharing. And that that nugget about changing the questions asked on that intake form from term to term, because the needs of the student are going to be a little different from term to term. So thank you for sharing all of that. Dinah from Mott, could you share your strategies with us and approaches that are taking place at your institution?
Sure. Thank you, Precious. I want to start out by saying I'm really lucky to be in the position that I'm in, because Mott, before the pandemic, launched a program to basically work with students to address any barriers that get in the way of them being successful in school. And we identified any basic need areas, and we developed the Lenore Crowdy Family Life Center, which is attached to our early childhood center. So that I came out in October, and then the actual center opened up in August. And I'm a social worker by trade, so I'm the lead social worker of the center. And the things that we quickly shifted are, we have a pantry, we have a food clothing closet, we do My Bridges navigation, we have navigators that navigate My Bridges. We do pretty much, we're like a one-stop shop. So we pretty much do anything that students need: enrollment support, registration support, SAP appeals, FAFSA applications. And what we found during this time, one of the things, how we identify the needs of our students, is we have a intake form like other colleges do, that the students take when they come to enroll to the college. And we have the platform called My Compass or Starfish. And I'm able to filter those questions. Like we have one question about food insecurity, and I'm able to filter that. And then when we filter that, I have 7 social worker interns from our social work technician program that are interning with me this semester. And they call each and every one of those students to let them know what we have to offer, and then how we can connect them to other resources. In addition to that, with the CARES funding, on all the students who received CARES funding or didn't receive CARES funding, the social workers have also called every single one of those people to see what other resources they might need. So we try to connect them with that. Our pantry went mobile from March to July. We were all delivery. So we delivered over 4,000 food boxes to families every 2 weeks, because we knew that they couldn't get to campus. We still continued our mobile delivery in a lesser amount after March, and we have curbside pickup for our students, and they are aware of it, so they are able to come up and pick up food, and they also are able to pick up clothing that we help facilitate with them on that. We have a lot of community partnerships that we have been building since the beginning of the program. And we've been doing some virtual partnerships. We have virtual AA programs that are starting, recovery programs that are starting in January for our campus community. We have virtual returning citizen support groups for people who've been incarcerated or involved in the jail system in any way. We have a virtual former foster care support groups that are starting. We're launching a My Bridges campaign in January, so students know that My Bridges is available to everyone. And we received testimonials from students who we've helped with My Bridges, and they were willing to share their likeness and share their testimonials. So we're putting that in our campaign. I don't know, there's probably a lot of stuff. But I'm in a really unique, and I want to say this, I'm in a really unique position because that's my job. That's what my center is designed to do. And so I'm really blessed. And then we have, it's all foundation based and it's all grant funded. And we're lucky because we've been able to receive grants to fund the center, and I've been able to, it's just grown exponentially during the pandemic. I think if it wasn't for the pandemic, I don't know if we would have grown as much as we did, but we grew a lot because I was able to get the interns that were able to intern with me. I have an MSW intern. We also have a part-time clinician who's providing virtual mental health support that we just brought on. We also have success coaches that just started. So we do an onboarding process, and the success coaches reach out to every student based on the survey, and then they will do soft handoffs to me or to the center, and then we'll do soft handoffs back. I have a very, very close relationship with financial aid, and we able to work collaboratively around helping students. We're doing a huge holiday program right now, and we're providing holiday support for a lot of our students are single parents who have several kids at home and can't work, so they can't do the holidays. And we received a huge donation. So we're able to support like families of, parents who have 7 kids, 8 kids, 9 kids. So we're working on that right now. So I've been really lucky because I've been able to be on the front end of all of this and just be really, the institution has been very supportive of us as being flexible and allowing us to think outside the box. And like the original, that being empathetic and being flexible, and where does that meet, and how can we see the students from their perspective? And I agree with what everybody else said, that a lot of our students were barely hanging on to begin with, and then when the pandemic hit, it created a lot of chaos for them. So we've spent a lot of one-on-one, but my big thing was one-on-one time, having someone talk to somebody as an individual and be able to either talk to them by email, text, or phone. And we also are starting a project in winter. It's called Connect to Complete, where we're embedding peer advocates in our developmental courses, our reading courses. And that's a pilot program, but we're using our social work interns to do that. And then also some of the work study students I have at the center to do that too. So we're just trying to think creatively and outside the box, what works for our students. And I'm finding that students really want to have somebody to talk to. And so, because we know it's like peeling back layers of an onion. You find there's one need that they have, and then there's another need, and there's another need, and then there's another need. And it's really a labor intensive job because it takes sometimes 2 or 3 people to help that student be whole again and persist. So I probably went over 5 minutes, and I know I talked really fast, and I'm so sorry, but I'm willing to answer any questions and help share resources in any way that I can. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Dinah, and everything that's been shared so far. I mean, you never know what you share could trigger an aha moment for someone else. And just surveying the room, I was sensing some of that as you were sharing all of the amazing strategies that have been working for Mott. And if you guys want to do some informal introductions and sharing of information, you can feel free to do that in the chat as well. And offline, it's something that we definitely encourage. We have some information. I am looking forward to hearing from you, Patty, as you share strategies that have been working for Muskegon. So if you would share your information with us for a few minutes, that'd be great.
Sure, and I'll try to keep mine short and sweet, and then if anybody has questions, they can send it to me after. So just to answer the few questions that Precious had sent to us, we basically we're similar to what everybody else has kind of said, that we already had a system in place, but the pandemic really just pushed that forward to almost to being, I wouldn't say we're at scale, but you know, there's quite a few people. We've had a dramatic increase in the number of instructors and students that are now using the system that we had already set in place. So we have a care team, and for it's an early alert system, but that early alert system really has shown us even more, because of the vast number of people that we've seen, what the students' needs are. And so we use Advise, which is an Ellucian product, but we also have expanded that. We had previously expanded it. We just didn't get a lot of usage out of it yet, to also using a Microsoft form, because previously only instructors or faculty members that had students on their roster could submit a care report. Well, we wanted to expand that so that staff could also do it, or faculty that wanted to report a student that wasn't on their roster. But then also, in addition to that, we wanted the students to be able to tell us when they needed something, besides just trying to find an email or trying to find an office. And so we've seen a large increase in all of those. So in comparison from last fall to this fall, our numbers quadrupled in the number of reports that we got. And so because of that, we were able to, luckily, we were able to expand the number of people that were helping with those, because we were a very small care team of just a few people. And so we've been able to streamline some of the efforts that we were doing before, which, you know, it's unfortunate that we're going through a pandemic, but it really has helped us make our services better. And so in addition to that, you know, already having that set in place and the number of people that are using it, one of the big things that came about for us, similar to what the others have said, is technology needs. And so that's one of the big things that we were able to, we had it on a very small scale before. We started out with about, I think about 5 laptops that we were able to loan to students. And it happened to be that somebody said to my boss, hey, I have this old laptop. Could you use it for a student? And that's just how it started. Well, then since the pandemic, we've been able to, you know, we got some grants, we had some anonymous donations where we were able to purchase other technology equipment. So we now have a technology loaner program through the care team, where students can borrow a laptop, a webcam, and the big one right now is hotspots. And so, you know, we have a number of laptops out there, but hotspots are a big deal because there's so many students that we serve that are in the rural community that don't have great internet at their house. And so that's something that we've had to deal with. We've had to try out different hotspots for them because of the type of connection that they get there. So we're still working for those. We actually have a couple people on a wait list for hotspots because we were waiting for them to come in. And so the other things I just want to briefly mention, we started with an intake survey and we were about to launch it, like we had done a pilot, and then the pandemic hit. And so we don't actually have an intake survey yet. We have it created, but we haven't actually launched it yet because we haven't had time to really implement that right now. And then I just want to, I made myself some notes here, so one second. The other thing I wanted to mention that, so something that we did because of the pandemic is we have done a few over the last, you know, over this time period, check-in and technology surveys to students, asking them how they're doing. And so if they're not reaching out to us, if they at least answer our survey, and then they can tell us if they need something there. And so we've had personal phone calls to anybody that has answered that has indicated that they have a technology need, or that, they're just not doing okay. If they answered the question of how are you doing, and I think the three things, the middle one was like so, one of them was great, one of them was so, and then one of them was like not at all. So if they were great, then we didn't necessarily respond. But if they were any of the other answers, we made sure that we made a personal phone call to them to see what we could do to help them and get them set with any resources that they might need. We also are in the midst of this week of training. We were awarded 2 McCann college completion coaches that will start in January. And so we're super excited about that. Well, at first we found out about one of them, and then we were planning on having that one focus on Futures for Frontliner students, because we know that they're going to need some help, as someone else talked about earlier today. And originally our grant request was for Pell, TIP, or first generation students, but then we're going to also focus on this. So they gave us a second one. And so now we have one for each group. So we're really excited about that. Heidi Romero and I are working on getting them trained this week so that they're good to go right at the beginning of January. Precious, I hope I hit everything you wanted me to hit.
You hit everything and more, Patty. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yes to MCAN Help. Awesome. So I am going to share out my screen so that we can breeze through the next portions of the agenda today. I have the PowerPoint slide available online, so you all can feel free to get information and share the slide deck and the recording once it's available to your counterparts if this information would be helpful for others at your institution to hear. A lot of resources have already been shared, and I can't do it justice at all. What I have here is just a capture or a snapshot of resources that were also shared when I was having the SOA calls. So one institution is doing talk tours, which involves the president walking around campus when in-person campus interactions was a thing. Hopefully it will be a thing again in 2021. But the talk tours that are now virtual is an opportunity for students to interact with the president and other pieces of leadership on the institution to ask questions, and for leadership to understand what's happening from the perspective of the student, as well as all other stakeholders who are interacting with leadership as they're doing the talk tours. It's a great way to understand the needs of students in a ground level approach to understanding the student perspective. It also has built some campus culture around sharing what's working and sharing what's not, and having that continuous feedback loop of the student experience and ways in which leadership is trying to support the needs of their students. Virtual town halls is something that a lot of us are familiar with. In the scale of adoption assessment, there's a section in there that talks about ways in which you are looking to capture the concerns of students, and virtual town halls are absolutely one way that can be done, but as well as informing your campus about the, the changes that are taking place. Students Helping Students was an innovative way that resources are being shared, and I wanted to spotlight that as a strategy in the event that this would be helpful and a good fit for your institution. So what this looks like is a student has developed a website that that a student can go to and insert their zip code to find resources that are available to them. So similarly to My Bridges, except from a student. And I thought that was a great way to normalize the receiving of services, because at some point, all of us are asking for help. Even if you are, like Ashley mentioned earlier, her kiddo was asking for a pencil. I mean, asks can be of any size, and all of us are asking of something. And so what better way to encourage students to continue to ask than when they're interacting with another student? The ALICE report is another resource that I wanted to share out, as this is a way for you to understand the needs of your community and those community members who then could be potential students at your institution. So a part of the ALICE report, it talks about emerging concerns, emerging needs of individuals within a community. And health inequality was one of the needs that was shared in the most recent ALICE report. And I'm wondering if we had known about the ALICE report ahead of time, if we could then be preemptive, knowing that health inequality was going to be an area that that services and supports would then need to be in place. So I want to again suggest that the ALICE report is something that we should routinely begin to interact with and read and know about, because the topics that are covered in the ALICE report can then inform the practices that you want to implement on your campus, or again, do additional case making for the strategies that you want to bring that might not be in place yet. The campus that is currently using ALICE data is sharing this information with their faculty members so that faculty can better understand the students that they're engaging with in their spaces, both virtual and in person. So faculty members who are adjunct faculty, and then routine faculty who have an idea of the student experience, but may not have an in-time understanding of student needs, ALICE report can be helpful data to do case making with faculty. And we'll talk about faculty engagement more in 2021 in our coming workshops. MyBridges 211, again, is a helpful resource. A lot of our panelists talked about MyBridges today. We have Dr. O from Delta, who is using MyBridges and has integrated that into the practices at Delta College. So Dr. O, would you share a couple minutes about what MyBridges looks like at your institution? That would be great.
Yes, thank you, Precious. Greatly appreciate that. So yes, we are a partner of the MyBridges referral. We have staff, we have an office professional, and also an AmeriCorps Vista. They go into the system regularly. They seek out individuals that are looking for an educational need. We're able to reach out to those individuals to seek what type of services they're requesting. Everything, like everybody else, has went, virtual, online due to COVID. And so we're able to provide a number of different services through virtual. And so we're able to help them out, with their admissions applications, their financial aid needs, in the career exploration. If they have to do some practice tests, we give them materials for that. We're able to do referrals out if they're still seeking, any type of for housing or food or things either on campus we can provide and or out in the community for those referrals as well. So we've been able just to really touch base to help those individuals figure out that line of educational need. Like many of us, unfortunately, a lot of individuals are trying to just meet their basic needs right now. So we are receiving referrals, not as many as we had thought, but we are definitely receiving those individuals seeking that information. What we've also done, just like many other institutions, is we have an online bookings, which means that individuals can go and be referred to our site, our website. It's actually linked right to our Microsoft Office calendar. They can go ahead and book a virtual appointment based on their need, their date, their time, or on their work schedules, children's schedule for school, even though many of them are doing virtual, but they can actually select an appointment that meets their needs. And again, that comes right to our calendar. We're able to provide the exact same services again. So I think that having the referral system in place has been really beneficial, especially now in this time of need, virtually, and just being able to connect with them and then do those referrals and continue on for their educational. We're hoping that it'll increase more now that Michigan Works as a partner with that, to be able to get those referrals in addition to those we've already received thus far.
Great. Thank you, Dr. O. In addition to what she shared, there are institutions who have established partnerships with their local DHHS office. So in the portal that a student would go into to schedule an appointment to meet an advisor, a student can also go into that same scheduling portal to schedule a meeting with the DHHS worker. I thought that was a great way to connect students to someone who is familiar familiar with state benefits and the state and the way in which that system works. So if that is a strategy that might be a good fit for your institution, just know that that is working, and it could work for your campus as well. I wanted to again, go in the vein of creativity, because flexibility is something that a lot of us, is a muscle that a lot of us are having to exercise right now. So if we stepped out of the box and continue to do so, to think about what is possible, that is a strategy that could be possible for your location. Locating resources through MyBridges is the biggest bang for your buck in supporting the individuals in your spheres of influence to being familiar with the MyBridges portal. There are trainings online and at your fingertips, all through a beautiful Zoom screen. So if you would like some additional help in understanding MyBridges, you can feel free to contact me, reach out, contact Dr. O, and MCSS mentor will be in touch with you to help you understand MyBridges. Trellis, thank you all for those who have done the Trellis survey. Results are coming March 2021. We're also going to do a Trellis webinar on March 30th of 2021. So mark your calendars now, save the date. During that webinar, we will share out information across the state of Michigan as it pertains to the financial needs of our students and what the results were of the survey. So every institution who participated in the survey, you're going to get your individualized survey data. But on March 30th, we will do a broad sharing of commonalities that existed across all of the students who have taken the survey. So you can set your appetite for that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about one way to look at the stages of change. So MyBest is an initiative that is, it's grant funded. And so the initiative is the grant is ending June of 2022, but that doesn't mean that MyBest initiatives and practices have to go anywhere. My hope and my true desire is that everything that you guys are implementing at the systematic level will stay in place well beyond June of 2022. Economic stability is something that we all know is a need of our students and needs attention. And so I just wanted to shine some light on one way to look at the stages of change. Maintenance of the old system, you know, that was when we are talking about tutoring hours and how we thought 9 to 5 was a great option. And at that time, it probably was, but now we are aware of the needs of our students. So we can begin to explore different ways to do tutoring hours, to do advising hours, and then transition to doing things a new way. And as we begin to grow and know more about our students and needs, because those needs are going to be changing as individuals are always changing, we can feel free to go back to, okay, that was the old way. What's a new way now that we understand that our student population is emerging and changing and growing? Some questions that I wanted to leave you with as it pertains to understanding change and looking at it through this lens is, what stage could your MyBest team be in right now? What individuals need to come to the table that haven't yet had a voice that would help you move the needle to change, systematic change? And we're going to be breaking up into groups. I wanted to leave some time for you all to get into your groups with with individuals from your institution to talk about, okay, how can we move from challenge to action? Because there were a lot of challenges and a lot of flexibility that was needed in 2022. But 2021 is coming. So how can we move forward in ways that would be best for us and for our students? So when you break into your groups, I have some questions listed here that might be helpful to start your conversations of, what are you going to do next semester? What is your point of focus going to be as a team? And what are the immediate next steps for your campus? Erica had supported us in getting into our breakout rooms earlier today, and she's going to help us get into our rooms here. If you haven't yet changed your name to reflect your institution, I welcome you to do that now so that it's easier for Erica to break us up into groups.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, 2021 is full of surprises, and maybe we can venture off and use that as a strategy to continue our virtual convenings until we are once again able to interact in person safely and well. Just ending with some next steps. So we have some amazing MCSS mentors who are welcoming the opportunity for institutions and colleges to ask them questions and say, hey, I saw that you shared this strategy at the workshop. I would love to get your take on how you did that. After the scale of adoption calls, everyone gave me a point of focus, and some mentors will be contacting you to see if there's any support that they could offer. So in the event that you have that touch point from a mentor, that is where that is coming from. There's also coaching opportunities available with NCII. So every institution will have the opportunity to schedule a 60-minute session with Rob and Priya and talk about your points of focus that you discussed in your small groups. So be on the lookout for signups and more information on how to schedule those in 2021. We also have some My Best events coming up. There are events scheduled and ready for registration for the first half of 2021, believe it or not. So you can feel free to start marking your calendars and block out some times for the upcoming events. The first one is going to be a touch point with all of the My Best leads on January 20th. So mark your calendars. And then as we end, I wanted to offer everyone an opportunity to do some self-reflection and some self-care. You know, we talked a lot about how we are supporting the needs of students, but I also think that it's important for us to be aware of the needs that we have for ourselves, because we are also human who also have needs, and those needs should be met with care. So there's a self-care challenge I welcome you all to try within, the next 24 hours or so, if you have the opportunity to just kind of decompress, especially after a long, stressful day of supporting students. So this self-care challenge involves some self-reflection. So over 24 hours, you would ask yourself 3 questions. The 3 stands for what 3 things am I thankful for? In the last 24 hours, what are 3 things I'm thankful for? The 2 would be, what are 2 things that I have accomplished? And then the 1 would be, what is 1 thing that I have learned? So in the last 24 hours, what are 3 things that I am thankful for, 2 things that I have accomplished, and 1 thing that I have learned? That is the self-care challenge that I offer to you all as you begin to reflect on this year, all the things that you've accomplished at your institution, but all the things that you have accomplished internally, because this has been a tough and challenging year. And I celebrate everything that you all have accomplished and done, and I am truly, truly thankful. So I wish you all well, and I hope that you all find some rest.